Frank Martin was a former special ops soldier who now has become a highly skilled mercenary residing in southern France. Call sign, the transporter. He strictly follows 3 rigid rules when transporting. Never change the deal. No names. Never open the package. In Nice, he was hired to transport 3 bank robbers, but they hoisted a 4th man in his car after the robbery. Explaining the extra weight will affect his precisely planned getaway, he refused to drive until the leader killed one of his men. Then Frank sped up to get rid of the police. He crossed the narrow alley to the street and ran into a reverse traffic, making the 3 robbers scream like toddler. With the excellent driving skills, Frank managed to shake off the chasing vigilant. But he was pinned down by more cops at a bridge. After a quick observation, he took the opportunity driving off the bridge and landed on a truck. He then took over a robber's gun and broke the trailer's fixed pole, making a car slid onto the road, colliding with the chasing police. Then he reversed the car and drove sharply towards the railroad tracks and got away. Later, Frank was inevitably questioned by the inspector, but he acted cautiously and never left any traces. The inspector could not find any evidence despite his suspicion. Due to the superb efficiency and unmatchable delivery ratio, Frank got his next package right afterwards. When he went to the trunk to get spare tires, he found out that the new package contains a living human, and he could not help but thinking of his rules. However, he stopped to buy a bottle of water and opened the parcel, in which was a girl named Lai. Frank didn't give her a chance to talk, so he let her drink some water and shut her back, but noise in the trunk distressed him from driving. So he took out a coil of rope, tied one end to Lai's body and the other in his hand to give Lai a minute to pee, but whom ended up running away. Frank soon caught her back to his car. His suspicious parking had attracted the police. He unwillingly beat the cops down to conceal his tracks. Lai surely had brought him trouble. After arriving at the destination, the recipient, Wall, picked up the package and paid his commission, and then asked Frank to deliver a code box. Frank went on to his next delivery. Of course, he didn't forget to buy some water for the 2 policemen in the trunk, but when he was just about to return to the car exploded. The code box was actually a detonation bomb. Wall wanted him dead. Seeing his beloved drive blasted into flames, he furiously rushed back to the walls, kicking down the door, beating the shit out of everyone, but to find Wall's not there. He then came to the garage taking a car with him and left. But Lai was also on the car. On his way, he abandoned the troublemaker Lai on the road, but couldn't bear to go far. So he unwillingly brought her back to his home. Lai was touched by this subtle action. She was curious about Frank. The next morning she made breakfast for Frank and kept flirting him, however Frank stated that he prefers a quiet morning. Then the inspector came asking Frank about his blown car and asked him and Lai to go to the police station by the afternoon. The 2 pretended to be a couple and managed to fool the inspector till he walked off the scene. As they were settled to further discuss, a group of heavily armed mercenary arrived exploding Frank's residence piece by piece. Frank took Lai to the emergency exit. The 2 dived into the water before the house collapsed. To not raise more suspicion from the police, they changed their clothes and headed to the station in the afternoon. Frank continued to lie and said that he and Lai were not at home when the incident happened, and when they returned, the house was nowhere to be found. When the detective had to go out for a while, Lai took the opportunity to find the information of Wall on the police computer. After leaving the police station, Lai thought Frank would revenge, but Frank did not want any more trouble. She told him that there was a container on a boat carrying her family inside. She had to save them. Frank then realizes that Lai had been flirting him for a reason, but his sense of justice drives him to Wall Street's office, where he threatens Wall to tell him the number of the ship. But Wall said Frank was lied by Lai, and as he was talking, Lai's father, Mr. Kwai, entered the office and knocked Frank out. When he woke up, he found himself lying in the police station. The inspector persuaded him to tell the truth so that he could investigate. Frank knew that things would be worse with police's engagement. He pended the inspector to offer him 12 hours to get things settled first. The inspector agreed, and pretended to be held as hostage and helped him escape. Frank came to the port to look for the container, but he saw Wall Street and others were preparing to transport the container away. Lai was also taken by his father to the car. At this time Frank's whereabouts were exposed. He took out the thugs, leapt onto the truck but was forced to jump off. The gang immediately chased after him. He smartly kicked off a bucket of oil to lubricate the ground, causing the chasers to slip. He also lubricated himself and used a pair of bike pedals to maintain his stand. With this technique, he easily wiped out the mobs, and escaped from the dock. Then Frank went after the truck again, but his impromptu vehicle broke down. He then hijacked a plane and got on the truck with parachute. He bashed the truck driver out and took control of the steering wheel. However, With Mr. Qui consistent covering fire, Wall climbed onto the truck and entered the cab. He kicked Frank out of the cab, but Frank survived, barely clinging under the truck. He managed to climb back onto the roof and torpedoed himself back into the cab, throwing Wall off the truck. With the last rival being dealt with, he drove the truck to somewhere quiet, but Mr. Qui followed him all the way. He asked his subordinates to take his daughter away, and forced Frank to come to the edge of cliff to execute him. A gunshot rang out, but it ended up to be Lai killing her own father and saved Frank. A few moments later, police finally arrived. Lai slowly opened the container. With the refugees teetering out of the container, they were finally safe from the smugglers. Frank was a former Special Ops soldier who now has become a mercenary residing back in America. Call sign, the Transporter. As he was preparing for his new transportation, few young mobs disturbed his gearing. To not be late at the rendezvous, he hurriedly beat them up and let them flee. His new job turned out to be escorting a kid called Jack from school, whose father Jefferson was a high-profile officer in the government. The marriage of Jefferson and his wife Audrey was under great strain due to his government job. This leads Audrey to seek solace in Frank. For once she was getting somewhat drunk and attempting to seduce him, but Frank turned her down, and tactfully sent her home. Making Audrey realize, Frank's a professional and trustworthy man. During one regular escort, Frank took Jack to the hospital for medical checkup. Jack was nervous. The two had built an intimate bond. He encouraged Jack to move on. Then Frank received a call from his French detective pal Turconi, who decided to spend his holiday in Florida with him. However, as he was speaking, Frank noticed that the staffs here weren't usual. They were imposters who had already killed and masqueraded as doctors. Especially the nurse at the counter. Frank opened the door and saw that the imposter was going to inject something to Jack. They immediately burst into a fight. And the imposters were overskilled by Frank. However, the nurse outside started gun blazing at him. In this case, Frank took out an oxygen can, put it on a cart and pushed it out. Then he smashed the light with a fire extinguisher to cause sparks, which led to a huge explosion. He then took the opportunity to escape from the elevator with Jack. But what he didn't know was that, in the parking lot, a bomb had been placed right under his car. And he drove it right afterwards. As Frank arriving at Jefferson House, he received a call. A voice warned him that a sniper was aiming at his skull. If Frank don't follow what he said, Jack would be died. Frank followed the instructions. He picked up the nurse imposter Lola. And drove off the scene. A large group of cops chased after them. Frank managed to perform an unrealistic stunt jump and shook off the police. Later, under the guidance and threat of Lola, Frank met the boss Gianni Cellini and handed over Jack. Gianni subsequently called Jefferson, asking for $5 million within 2 hours. At this time, Jefferson and the police all believed Frank had kidnapped Jack. After that, Gianni set Frank free. While he was leaving, he found the bomb under his car. And he didn't spare any horses along the way and used the hook on a crane to remove the bomb. And landed safely. However, at this time, Turconi, who was enjoying his vacation at Frank's house, was arrested by the police for interrogation. Frank returned to the hospital for investigation. Via the security cam, he identified imposter Dimitri. So he called Turconi for help. In the police station, Turconi was surprisingly teaching the American police how to cook French food. After hearing Frank's request, he secretly used the police computer to find Dimitri's address and led Frank to his whereabouts. Seeing Frank, Dimitri panicked and fled. Frank rode a jet ski to catch up with the bus, forcing Dimitri to expose the plan. He also injected Dimitri with unknown liquid, making him startled. As he kept stumbling towards somewhere, Frank followed him along the way. On the other side, Gianni kept his promise. He released Jack. And Audrey was relieved, embracing her son again. But she didn't know she had fallen into Gianni's plan. Frank soon discovered the conspiracy. He followed Dimitri all the way to a lab. And Dimitri was asking pharmacist for the cure. Frank appeared afterwards, beating him down. The pharmacist told Frank that the yellow injection was a lethal virus. People would die within 24 hours after being injected. The virus was also highly infectious, could spread by the infected's breath. Jack was also injected before he was released. Kidnapping was just facade. Gianni's target was Jack's father Jefferson. And the purple potion turned out to be the cure. But the pharmacist threw them out of the window and escaped. Frank jumped out to pick it. He saved the last cure at the risk of losing his hand under the wheel. Meanwhile, Jack began to show symptoms, and Jefferson was also busy coughing. Frank secretly visited Audrey at night, told Audrey everything, and injected the cure to Jack. Gianni's target would be the National Drug Control Conference. With Jefferson's participation, he would disseminate the virus all over the country. Audrey called Jefferson. Unfortunately, the signal was bad. Jefferson didn't understand what she said. The conference was held as scheduled. Gianni watched it on TV and enjoyed his show. Knowing Gianni would have stored more cure. Frank called Turconi again, who helped him find the address of Gianni. Haplessly, on the way, Frank's car was impounded by the police, so he had to stop a taxi and took the driver to Gianni's place. At the same time, Gianni injected the remaining cure all into his body. Frank later arrived at the place and had a shootout with the mob. He sneaked into the warehouse from a vent. The thugs soon followed up. Although being outnumbered, Frank still managed to fend off the thugs. He asked the taxi driver to start up a sports car for evacuation. After dealing with all the thugs, Frank finally met up with Gianni, who was ready to leave. Now Gianni is the cure, Frank can only capture him alive. But before that, Lola appeared to hold Frank back. Her agility did bring Frank some trouble, but after a few rounds, Frank ended her life by kicking her onto the spikes. Then he rushed out of the garage in a Lamborghini to the airport, and boarded the plane at its last moment for takeoff. The showdown begins. During the shootout, facing Frank, Gianni accidentally killed the pilot, making the plane falling into the sea. As it was sinking, Frank counterattacked Gianni and dragged him back to the surface. The police soon surrounded the area. Yet another day as the transporter. Frank came to the hospital, watching the family happily chatting. He left flowers and walked out of the hospital. At the end of the movie, Frank got a call saying, "I'm looking for a driver." He firmly replied, "I'm listening," hinting there will be a Transporter 3. After the Miami Heat, Frank Martin, call-sign the Transporter, has returned to France. He is now enjoying his retired life, going on regular fishings with his old pal Turconi. Meanwhile, in East Europe, Leonid Tomalenko, the environmental agency minister who has been promoting environmental policies, receives a mysterious phone call. The caller claims to be commissioned to negotiate about trading permissions. The minister flatly refused. Because he could not permit any chemical pollutant discharge in exchange for profits. However, the caller kidnapped his daughter to have him reconsider signing the contract in 24 hours. Back to Frank, he was being a couch potato watching random TV show till a car suddenly bumped into his house. The crash shattered his drowsy night. He went on to check on the driver, who was severely injured. After peeking his license, he noticed the driver was also a transporter. At this point, he could not help thinking about the job he rejected. A few days before, few folks came at him threatening for transportation. Frank kindly beat those retarded up and left. And now, this dying driver has taken his job. He requested him not to take him out of the car. But who was soon taken onto the ambulance. Frank also found a girl in the car. She informed Frank that they were attached with the explosive bracelet, which could blow if they were far away from the vehicle. Hearing this, Frank rushed out to stop the ambulance, but to see it explodes. As he's about to interrogate the girl for more details, he was knocked out. Frank woke up with the same bracelet he saw last night. When he suited up, the caller Jonas Johnson appeared. He threatened Frank to transport parcels for him. Without other options, Frank accepted. Johnson also brought Frank's car, but now it's geared with GPS and detonation device. If Frank tries anything suspicious, his car will be his own grave. Frank then takes the girl and hit the road. Johnson doesn't give him a specific location. He just wants the minister's daughter in constant movement until the minister signed the contract. On the way, the two had short conversations and got to know each other. The girl's name is Valentina, and she had been kidnapped like Frank. But Frank is not a sitting duck. He immediately deviated from the route and drove to a friend for help. The friend, a mechanic, recognizes Frank's bracelet and proceeds on research. At the same time, Johnson saw Frank deviating from his intended route and sent out his men. While the mechanic is looking for the bomb transmitter, Johnson's men arrive. After a few words, a fight breaks out. Frank, again, kicking their asses. Valentina is fascinated. She was attracted by Frank's masculinity. When Frank finishes the mobs and changes into new clothes, she goes up to fix Frank's tie. The technician finally found the signal transmitter, but the transmitter cannot be removed or it would explode. And the bracelet cannot be defused either. Frank has to take Johnson's scheduled route. Johnson is also unhappy with Frank's deviation and orders to replace the driver. He arranges Frank to answer from public phone, and then sent the new driver to take over the car. Frank gets on a bike and rushes his life back to the vehicle. After an intense stunt, he successfully kicked the new driver out of his car. Then again, back to the minister. He could not sit idly while his daughter being kidnapped. He deploys agents to rescue her and postpones the contract signature. The agents first searched at Frank's house and obtained the GPS of the previous vehicle. They're gradually picking up the traces. Meanwhile, Turconi also discovered this case abnormal. He received a phone call from Frank. They exchanged information. Frank also called Johnson at the same time to deliberately acquiesce with him. In the course of the call, he kept Turconi tracking the signal, trying to locate Johnson. But the call was not long enough to get his exact location. Frank had to continue to the new coordinate. While he is refueling, he finds the agents has found him. He immediately carries the drunken Valentina back to the car and speed away. During the escape, Frank questioned Johnson why he still sent his men after his ass. But Johnson clarifies that he didn't and he will find out who it is. During the chase, Frank tilts the car to squeeze through two blocking trucks and drives into an side road. He suddenly slows down and lets the agent overpass him, and then accelerates to push the agent's car, jacking it off a cliff. By this point, he begins to wonder what the package in the trunk really is. After opening the package, it turned out to be just some ordinary books. He finally realizes that the real cargo is Valentina. After all of the life and death, they develop some sort of relationship. Valentina seduces Frank by holding his car keys, resulting in them having sex. Afterwards, Valentina explained that the previous driver broke the rules for her to contact her father. As a result, Johnson's henchman came after him before she could say a word. He was unfortunately shot and had no choice but to find Frank for help. Johnson calls to warn the minister, but the minister demands to hear from his daughter before signature. Johnson then sends Frank the new coordinate for pickup. The next day Turconi meets the minister and uses his call with Johnson to locate. On the other side, Frank has already arrived at the coordinate. The bridge is blocked. Johnson unlocks Valentina's bracelet but orders to kill Frank. Frank drives off the bridge and falls into the water. Johnson thinks he had everything settled. Because, in the water, swimming up to the surface will detonate the bomb, and staying in the car will drown Frank to death. But Frank survived by taking out a buoying device from the trunk and used the tires to pump up the buoy, successfully bringing the car back to the surface. When Turconi and the police arrive, Frank and his car has already been towed ashore. On to his next move, Johnson takes Valentina to a train to avoid the police, and has Valentina on the phone with her father. He gives the minister 15 minutes to sign the contract. Turconi informs Frank Johnson's whereabouts. Frank immediately drives after the train. Successfully landed the car from the bridge to the top of the train. He chases Johnson all the way through the cabs, one henchman down after another. Frank is making good progress. But he is too close to the detonation range, triggering the bracelet about to explode. One more step will end him in pieces. Johnson sees this opportunity and separate the cabs. Frank have to return to the car and hit the gas, driving and crashing back into Johnson's cab. He gets off immediately, beating Johnson, unlocking the bracelet with his key, strapping him with the bracelet and sending his car into reverse. Johnson is still struggling and breaks free, but inevitably blown into pieces inside of the cab. At 9 o'clock, having not received a call from the police, the minister slowly signs the document. But at this very moment, the phone rings. Upon hearing from Turconi that Valentina is safe, Tomalenko tears up the EcoCorp contracts. The illegal cargo ship is also raided by the police and sent away from Ukrainian shores. Later, Frank and Turconi return to fishing in Marseille. But unlike usual, Valentina is also on the boat, teasing them should eat at a restaurant instead. The Transporter trilogy ends here. There's still a non-canon Transporter movie remaining, called The Transporter Refueled. If you'd like to see it in the upcoming recaps, comment down below so that I shall make up my mind making it. If you do enjoy watching the video, don't forget to leave a like and consider to subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one. Abyssal signing out.